Let's get into Daniel 11. There are 4 viewpoints in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We have not come into a united position on Daniel chapter 11. Let me go through these 4 viewpoints. The Uriah Smith viewpoint. The king of the north in Daniel 11 would be Turkey, and the king of the south would be Egypt, as in Napoleonic Egypt. There is no known Seventh-day Adventist theologian that agrees with Uriah Smith today. However, there are a few pastors, one of which is a friend of mine by the name of John Whitcomb, and he wrote the book Jerusalem Caliphate, the Third Jihad. Now, hear me carefully. John and I became friends over our disagreement on Daniel 11. Did you get that? Just because we disagree doesn't mean we have to hate each other. And if that's the only thing I get through, it's been very successful. Now, there's a reason I don't agree with Uriah Smith. I believe he had some of the very best material in his time. But with lots of things, going a little further in time, you see things a little better, especially in prophecy. In Daniel 7 and 8, the end-time villain is the power called the little horn, papal-led Christianity, right? Well, Daniel 2, 7, 8, and 11 are repeats. So they start from Daniel's time and ends with God's kingdom over and over again, right? How is it then that the end-time villain switches from the papacy to Turkey? That doesn't make sense. It didn't fit. And there are a couple other things, but there's one right off the bat. Then there's the timid viewpoint. It's really simple. We won't know until after it happens. I can tell you it doesn't work very well for evangelism. Can you picture advertising a meeting we won't know till after it happens? But it's hard to be wrong. Well, if you say you don't know till after it happens, you can't be wrong. That's the advantage of that view, except that when it starts happening, the people in that view tend to keep saying, well, we don't know. So it becomes dangerous in that sense. There's a third view. This is called traditional or secularism. Atheism is the king of the south view. The king of the north is the papacy. The king of the south is secularism, atheism, communism. There's a variation of viewpoints. This one began being taught in the early 1900s, and especially once we hit the 30s and 40s, Louis Weir and then Hans Laurendale. And here's what they said. They said that once we get to the cross, every prophecy is symbolic. It's no longer literal. It's called the hermeneutic of the cross. But I've got a question. In Matthew 24, when Jesus is quoting from Daniel, the prophet, talking about the fall of Jerusalem, was that symbolic or literal? And 70 AD. It works very well until you get to Daniel. And Jesus quoted Daniel and gave it 2 ways, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But it was very literal. So that brings us to the 4th view, the one that I'm going to be presenting with you. The king of the north is papal-led Christianity, and that agrees with James White and others that taught the same thing. And the king of the south is Islam. Now that actually agrees with the pioneers who taught in the woes of Revelation 9, it was Islamic-Christian conflict. And I'll be pointing out there were 3 woes. There are also 3 conflicts after the cross between the north and the south. They're in parallel. Okay, so which of these 4 viewpoints is the endorsed view of the Seventh-day Adventist Church? None of them. Oh, I know. I have gone to the GC and defended what I teach. And they will not endorse nor condemn, because there is no endorsed view. They like what I do because of, well, a couple of reasons. It challenges people not to hate Muslims, and I tell people not to hate each other if they disagree. So, because we agree on so many more things than we disagree on. All right, so, don't know if, yeah, you can see it. Down across the bottom of there, Daniel11prophecy.com. That is not my website. That is the website of a Daniel 11 study group in Berrien Springs, Michigan. We've had 2 meetings. We've set up a yearly meeting in October, so this coming October 2020 will be our 3rd presentation. It was our book and the studies that we had in Berrien Springs that resulted in this conference. And we have a growing number of theologians that are endorsing what we're doing, people like Roy Gain, Randy Yonker, and others. Doug Batchelor is there with us, and quite a few others now. All right, but you can go to that one if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the Hebrew Daniel 11. My wife's nodding. We had several days of Daniel 11 Hebrew, 7 Hebrew scholars on the platform wading through the Hebrew to try and help us differentiate between the different viewpoints. And this 4th viewpoint did very well in that. I'm going to take you back to the context before we get into Daniel 11 itself. Last year, I got to thinking we were missing something. I didn't know what. It's just the Holy Spirit was telling me I was missing something in Daniel 11. And I felt it had to do with the whole setting and context. And I started reading from Daniel 8 through 12 over and over again to see what God was telling me I was missing. I wish he would be a little more specific, but it's in there somewhere. And here's what I found. Daniel 8, there's a vision. It's verses 1 through 14. There are 3 interpretations. Daniel 8, 15 to 27. Daniel 9, 20 to 27. And Daniel chapters 10 through 12. This Daniel 11 prophecy is actually tied directly to Daniel 8 in the context. Now, that gets interesting. Remember Daniel 2 and 7 all started with Daniel's time and go to God's kingdom. But there is no mention of, you're going to see that quite often, tot, time of the end. There is no mention of it. Daniel 8, it starts in Daniel's time, it ends with judgment, but again, there's no mention of the time of the end. And get this, and Daniel does not understand. Keep that in mind. He's troubled because he does not understand. Daniel 9 starts with Daniel's time again. It's about Jerusalem and God's people, and it ends with the fall of Jerusalem, but the focus is on Jesus and his righteousness. But he still does not understand, and there is no mention of the time of the end. Daniel 10 through 12. It starts with Daniel's time again. It talks about Jerusalem and God's people, and it finally ends with God's kingdom, because in the Daniel 8 series, it just never quite got to God's kingdom until you get to Daniel 11:12. And he finally understands it is a repeat with more information. Does that start ringing anybody's bell? The Millerite movement is going to start with Daniel 8. It's going to fail, but they're going to have to do it all over again according to Revelation 10. Daniel 11 is the repeat with more information in the context of Daniel 8 through 12. If you want to know what our message is going to be at the end, I believe that just told you. It's going to be based on 10, 11, 12. Now, what is present truth? In the first explanation gave us the 2,300 days in the 1840s. That was the new present information, right? In the 1840s, as the judgment is starting in 1844, the present truth is this is now the time of the judgment. It's still true, isn't it? But it's not the information that is current right now. It's over 100 years old. And we've lost the interest of our young people in our communities if we keep pushing on 1840s, because they don't care when they hear the date. It's still true, though. All right? Now, the beauty of Daniel 8 through 12 is you don't have to keep hammering on what was present truth in the past because it keeps moving. Next, Daniel 9. It's a focus on Jesus and his righteousness, which was the present truth in the 1880s. Do you notice that the Adventist church is unfolding Daniel in the order of his interpretations? That was exciting present truth. And it's still true, isn't it? But most of our young people know all about that, and they don't get too excited about it. Yeah, we've heard that before. It's still true. The 2300 days are still true. But remember, Daniel got the first part, and he didn't understand it. He got the second part, and he still didn't understand it. He didn't understand his message of Daniel 8 until he got 10 through 12. And it goes with the close of the judgment and deliverance. If we are living at the time of the end, which is the present truth? The beginning of the judgment or the end of it? The end of it. The beginning's still true, or we wouldn't be at the end. But present truth is what's going on right now. And I will tell you, when I get a chance to go in and talk to high school students, this gets their attention in a hurry. Because it's present truth. All right. Daniel 11. The vision is actually 10, 11, 12, but the prophecy begins in 11:2 and goes through 12:3, starting in Daniel's time, ending with eternity future. It is sequential in order, and it has been accurate in detail for 2,500 years. And some of it has been fulfilled in the last couple of years. But because we haven't been studying it, most Adventists don't know one thing after another is being fulfilled in Daniel 11. It's time to understand it. By the way, in Daniel 12, verses 4 and 5, it tells us that we will understand this at the time of the end, right when it applies to us. Okay, you know Daniel 2 and 7, right? Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome, divided Rome and the papacy. You know who the king of the north is all the way through because every one of those are the king of the north. They all invade Israel from the north. They are the kings from the north. It's that simple in Daniel 11. Now, let's take a look. There we have the Babylonian Empire. Now, let's take a closer look. We have Jerusalem and Babylon. But Babylon's not to the north, it's to the east. But if the king tried to go through the desert, it would burn up his army. And so he goes up the Euphrates River Valley, and he comes down on Jerusalem from the north. Here's where Uriah Smith missed it. He said the king of the north has their capital to the north of Jerusalem. But the biblical definition is that they invade from the north. Jeremiah gave us that biblical definition. Then we have the Medes and the Persians. And the Medes and the Persians followed the same route as the Babylonians before them. And in Jeremiah 50, verse 9, he calls the Medes and the Persians an assembly of great nations from the north. Babylon was the first of Jeremiah's kings of the north in Jeremiah chapter 1. Because they attacked there, he said, from the north. Here's what Daniel 11:2 says. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will rise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all by his strength. Through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. 4 more Persian kings. Oh, I need to tell you something. What does Persia actually represent in Daniel 11? Try Persia. Why do I say that? Because unless you can point in the text where it's changed and the rules of interpretation, I'm going to keep reading place names the same. When he says a place, I believe he means that place. Unless you can show me the text where it changes. All right. Now, and Greece actually would then mean Greece. Okay. So the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great comes in from the north. Then a mighty king shall arise who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will, Alexander the Great. And when he's arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion, with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted even for others besides these. All right. When the Greek Empire is split, it splits 4 ways, but in Daniel 11, he only cares about 2. 1 north, 1 south. We now have the entrance of the king of the south. And if the king of the north invades Israel from the north, the king of the south will do what? Invade Israel from the... That's all there is to the difficulty of Daniel 11, folks. You've got it figured out. It doesn't have to be hard. The amazing thing is we made this simple chapter where he uses no symbols the hardest one of them all. That's always baffled me once I figured it out. Because I was told it had to be symbolic in the latter part. And as long as I believed that, it was difficult. So the Greek Empire. Seleucid north, Ptolemy south. When those black and blue arrow fight back and forth, guess who gets caught in the middle? God's people do. And Jerusalem. Do you know who the new covenant is with? Israel. When you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you become a new covenant believer, and you're God's Israel. Guess where you're going to get caught in this prophecy? Yep, you know what's coming. That's exactly what it's going to be. Then we have Antiochus the Great with Cleopatra, and we're not talking about Mark Antony Cleopatra. We said it was, but when you look carefully at the text, this lady is born up north and goes south. Uh-oh. Cleopatra's, with Mark Antony, was born in Egypt. But Antiochus the Great, his daughter was born up north. Now, here's what it says. He's going to do these things. He's going to send his daughter south. She will not stand with him. He will head west. He will be defeated by a general. He will go home and die. And he should never have done those things, but he did them in order. Sends his daughter down there. She becomes queen, but she will not stand with him when he goes to war. He goes off to fight the Romans. They send a general out, meets him, defeats him, send him home to raise a tribute, which is a tax for losing a war. And he raids a pagan temple in Greece, and they get mad. His own people kill him. He's 5 for 5 in the sequence Daniel wrote it. That's how accurate Daniel is. All right. So if he attacks Rome and loses, Rome is now the king of the north. And Rome under Pompey comes in from the north. Daniel never misses. Now, verses 20 to 22 are the Roman phase of the king of the north. There shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle. Now, there's a slight difference of opinion among the Islam viewpoint. Is this Republican Rome, or is it Augustus? I'm still leaning a little towards Augustus, but I don't mind the other viewpoint either. And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered or taxed. Okay, goes on. And in his place shall arise a vile person to whom they will not give the honor of royalty. This is when Rome switches over to the little horn type power. And in Daniel 8, the little horn is both pagan and papal Rome. Okay, so it makes the switch early. And to whom they will not give the honor of royalty, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom with intrigue, which Tiberius does. And with the force of a flood they shall be swept away from before him and be broken, and also the prince of the covenant. And under Tiberius, Rome kills Jesus, the prince of the covenant. Now get this. Some of you guys are pastors in here. You've heard of chiasms. Jesus dies in verse 22, which puts it where out of 45 verses? Right in the middle. And there is a chiasm here. Now, if Jesus dies in the middle, he dies in the middle for his people that get caught in the middle, and at the end of it, he rescues his people who are caught in the middle. Jesus knows what it's like, and he's going to get his people out of it. That's truly the message of Daniel 11. All right? So that is beautiful as well. So the really important thing is, where do you stand with Jesus? Because if you knew everything there is to know about Bible prophecy and you don't know Jesus, you are in big trouble. Suppose Jesus was to come back and you knew everything about Bible prophecy, but you hadn't spent time with Jesus. And he looks at you and says, "Who are you?" Would that be trouble? Uh-huh. But suppose you didn't know very much about Bible prophecy at all, but you had a daily walking relationship with Jesus. And he shows up and he says, "Welcome home, child." That'd be pretty sweet, wouldn't it? Now let me tell you the best way. Know Jesus. Trust in him and walk with him and talk with him. And know Bible prophecy. Because when it looks like the world is coming apart, you see light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not the train coming to run you over, it's the rescue coming on. That's the best way. And I am into what's going on in the world, but I'm not discouraged by it. I'm excited that Jesus is coming. Now, from verse 22 onward, we have Rome attacking Jesus, and they fail to win. Whenever the current power attacks the rising power and loses, you have a new king in the north. So let me take you to Daniel 2 for a moment. You have legs of iron that become feet of iron and clay. Rome's going to continue, right? Clay, Jeremiah 18, God's people are clay. Go to the house of the potter. So you're going to have a combination of iron and clay, Rome and Christianity. Tell me, did that ever happen? Yeah. But we're going to have the rise of the papal Holy Roman Empire within the Roman Empire, and they come in with a small number of people, and they come in peaceably but with deceit. Now, let's take a look at something. From this time on, the king of the north is both a geopolitical, it's still going to follow the north-south kind of stuff on the map, but it is also a global religious power, as are Israel and the king of the south and every other power that gets mentioned. It will have a geopolitical on the map application. It will also have a globalized religious application. Now, where do I get that? Matthew 24. Jesus telling us how to interpret Daniel. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand, and that those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Jesus is talking about the fall of Jerusalem, which happened in 70 AD. He's talking about a literal geopolitical fulfillment, but he also goes on to talk about a globalized fulfillment where God's people go through a tribulation all over the world. Jesus gave us a twofold, and when Ellen White is talking about it, she calls it a twofold application. Now, Uriah Smith says, no, it's only literal. Okay? Then Hans Larendel says, no, it's only symbolic. And now some of us are saying, Jesus said it's both, so let's take it that way. Sometimes we get people on both sides mad at us when we do that. They say, you can't do that. Now, my question is, why not? Jesus did it. I thought that was pretty good logic. Look what happens when you take it that way. You have Christianity north, Islam south. Who gets caught in the middle? Jerusalem does. But more than that, so geopolitically, Jerusalem and Israel get caught in the middle. What city do they all want? Still want Jerusalem, don't they? To this very day, Daniel has never missed on this. But there's a globalized application. What's the day of worship for Israel? Sabbath. What, in the new covenant, God writes his law in our hearts and our minds, right? That would include the Sabbath, wouldn't it? But the king of the north didn't want to be called a Jew or an Israelite. Changed the day of worship because of that from Sabbath to... The king of the south didn't want to be called a Jew or an Israelite. So he changed the day of worship from Sabbath to... Where did God's people just get caught? Sabbath keepers have been caught in the middle for centuries. Have you ever heard that someday the Sabbath will be a sign of which side you're on? Don't wait too long. It's been that for centuries. If you're going to wait for it to become a sign before you get ready, you're going to wait way too long because it's already been that. Be careful waiting. Trust Jesus now. Let's just put it this way. If you're a Sabbath-keeping follower of the Bible and you go up where it says Christian, during around 1500, you go up there and you start teaching about the Sabbath and trusting the Bible and Jesus as your Lord and Savior, what are they going to do to you? They will kill you. You go down into Saudi Arabia or Egypt and try it in the same time period. What will they do to you? Did you just notice it doesn't matter where you go? If you're following God, you're going to be caught in the middle between these powers. I've been in Nigeria, up in Boko Haram territory. They had people with machine guns in the doorways while I was presenting. If you go to the Philippines, there it's Muslim, in the Nigeria, it's Muslim north, Christian south. Go to the Philippines, it's Christian north, Muslim south, and a Sabbath keeper can get in trouble anywhere. Did you catch this is real already? Do you see why young people start tuning in? Now, coins are very fascinating. This is Tiberius's coin. Under imperial Rome, Rome attacks the ministry of Jesus. They kill him. That's a pretty direct attack, right? And they destroy the earthly temple. Under Rome, papal Rome, they attack the heavenly ministry of Jesus and the heavenly temple. Do you see that transition there as well of the literal and the religious? Everywhere we have this double application in Daniel. From the time of Jesus, when he says to take it both ways, everything has two ways. Nothing fails. It always does. Now, verse 23. After the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully. He shall come up and become strong with a small number of people. That is pagan Rome making a link with the papacy. And it happens with Constantine. Constantine decides to fight under the cross and make Christianity legal when there were only 20% of the Roman Empire were Christians. It's small in number. They were peaceable. But look at the coin he mints. On the right is the sun. On the left is the cross. Do you notice he just mangled and mashed together paganism and Christianity? Only which one wins? The guy in the middle is Saul, the sun god. Which gets more push? The sun worship gets more push. And he's the first one to come up with the Sunday law. It's right on the coins. Daniel goes on, he shall enter peaceably even into the richest places of the province, and he shall do what his fathers have not done, or his forefathers. He shall disperse among them the plunder, the spoil, and the riches, and he shall devise his plans against the strongholds, but only for a time. The papacy would become very wealthy after mixed with pagan Rome, but only for a time. Remember the 1260 years of the little horn? It's the same thing. So you're down here in the time of those horns. And from this time on, we are talking about the papal Holy Roman Empire. I call it papal-led Christianity because it's more than just Catholics that follow the Pope. All right? Papal-led Christianity. Now get this. That's not all Roman Catholics. You probably know that. But in Revelation 18:4, it says, come out of her, my people. So God says he has a people in there, right? So does God have a people in there? God's word said so. So we're talking about a system, not the people. Let me say it another way. I think there's going to be a lot of former Catholics in heaven, as well as former Baptists, former Adventists, former Pentecostals, former lots of things. Did you just notice I called them all former? Yeah. Because we're finally simply going to be God's kids. All the barriers are gone. And it's going to be spectacular. But God's got people everywhere because he has a work everywhere. All right? Now, Islam comes up in 634 and 637. 4 armies sweep up out of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. 1 to the west of Jerusalem, 3 to the east. They go up above and come back down and conquer Jerusalem, but Jerusalem does not fall until Omar, the Caliph, the king of the south, comes up from the south with another army. So when the king of the south gets to Jerusalem from the south, and the armies all came from the south, Jerusalem falls. And so that matches. You keep going. Verses 25 to 28. I'm giving you kind of a brief overview that a lot of the detail is going to be in the study, the commentary we're going to give to you tomorrow. Now, verses 25 to 28 talk about the crusade. It's divided Christian Europe and against Islam. Verses 29 to 39 talk about the Reformation in the Islamic Ottoman Empire. Look at what it says in verse 29. It makes it very clear there are 3 conflicts. At the appointed time, he, the king of the north, shall return and go towards the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter. There are 3 conflicts. Anybody tell me how many woes there are in Revelation? 3. Our pioneers all said those woes were Islamic. You go to the 1840s and 1850s chart, and we have Islam right there in the bottom right section. Where did it go? I'll share with you tomorrow. Ellen White very firmly approved of that. But we dropped it. Daniel 11's bringing it back. Now, the former's the Crusades, the latter's the time of the end. The appointed, the one in the middle, is the Ottoman Empire. Now get this. During the first conflict, the papacy got Jerusalem. During the second one, they did not. And during the third one, they do again, according to the prophecy. So the first and the third are alike. The second one's different. He never misses. Why don't they get there, though? When they push south, they don't get there. For ships from Cyprus shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return in rage against the holy covenant and do damage. Now I want to show you how specifically Daniel has been fulfilled since the time of the cross. This information comes from Randy and Michael Yonker, archaeologists from the seminary in Berrien Springs. It's the Battle of Lepanto, 1571. I'm going to use this pointer for a little bit. All right. Cyprus is, oh man, right there at the end of that island, Cyprus. It's a long ways away. Makes it hard to hold that stable. And the Pope wanted to retake Cyprus and then go on to Jerusalem. And so the Turks were pushing, and they were taking Cyprus at the moment. And he calls together the armies of Europe. The armies of Europe attacked the Islamic powers during the Crusades because the Pope called for war against Muslims. And because they were afraid of the Muslims, they gathered together to fight them. Now, the Turks, the Muslims are pushing again. The Pope calls for war, and we get what's called the Holy League, not the Crusades this time. But every time the Pope calls for war, we head into a new conflict. And it's always the Christian powers support him because they're afraid of Muslims. Well, they're putting the Holy League together, and they put together a fleet of over 300 ships that sailed to Cyprus to retake it and then go on to Jerusalem. The Muslims put together a fleet of over 300 ships. They get to Cyprus first. They finish off Cyprus and head west. What did the prophecy say they were going to be stopped from ships from? Cyprus. That's where they just came from. They met in one of the largest naval battles of all time, right in here in the Battle of Lepanto, 1571. In a couple of hours, over 40 to 50,000 men died. The Muslim fleet was decimated. The Christian fleet was so badly damaged that it turned around and went home without retaking Cyprus. However, there's the painting that the Pope put up on the wall in the Vatican, celebrating the Battle of Lepanto, and the Muslims are on the right, the Christians are on the left, and the Muslims are skeletons. They lost. But there was a place right beside it where he wanted to put the picture of taking Cyprus and Jerusalem. But they didn't go back out. Remember what the prophecy said? They will be stopped from ships from Cyprus, and he will turn in anger against the covenant. The very next year, here's the picture they put in the place of what he wanted. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, where 70,000 plus Protestants, Huguenots, were tricked and butchered in France. The text said he's going to head south, he'll be stopped by ships from Cyprus, he will return home and attack the covenant in anger. And that is exactly what happened. When Daniel stops and takes a picture, he never misses. And we have these snapshots at different times along the line. And they're sequential. All right. Then we get to verses 40 to 45. It's the growing holy war in today's world. This is now. Only I'm going to give it a real quick overview and show you exactly how it's being fulfilled tomorrow. All right? So we have three conflicts. The Crusades, the Ottomans, and the time of the end with radical Islam. I'm often asked a question. Tim, are the Christians and the Muslims worshiping the same God? Please don't answer the question. Don't ever answer that question with a yes or a no. Because you can never give an honest answer with a yes or a no. I don't know if you've ever been in court as a witness, so far never as the defendant. And they ask you a yes-no question that you cannot honestly answer with yes or no. It's really frustrating. But here's the situation. At the time, well, let me back up. Jesus said you'll know his true followers because they will love their enemies and do good to the others. Right? So let's take a look at the Crusades. Which was it? The jihadists or the crusaders that loved their enemies and did good to the other side? Neither did. History is really clear. Actually, I once in a while get somebody that says, oh, the Muslims were. Oh, on Cyprus? Do you know what they did? They negotiated a surrender of the last fort. If you surrender, we'll let you leave peacefully. They came out, they captured them, they tied the commander up to a pillar and skinned him alive. And then massacred his troops. Oh, the Christians did the same kind of stuff. So, were they worshiping the same God? Here's my thought. Thank you. My thought is simple. There are many Christians and many Muslims who are worshiping the same false God of force, fear, and anger. Do it our way or else. However, there are some Christians and some Muslims who have found or are in search of the same true God of love, truth, peace, and forgiveness. And I'm going to show you in Daniel 11 that God calls a remnant out of Christianity and a remnant out of Islam. Together, they will proclaim Jesus and the Bible in the loud cry. That is not Chrislam. That is Jesus and the Bible as the authority. All right? I will be showing you that. Out of Daniel 11 and things that are happening right now in our world. Fabulous things going on right now. So, again, it is both geopolitical and spiritual. What you're going to see is the King of the North Sunday is going to challenge the King of the South in the third conflict Friday. Sunday's going to take out Friday, and then it's going to turn on Sabbath. It will gain the world's following by attacking radical Islam. Let's see, who doesn't like radical Islam? Russia? China? I was in Myanmar. They're genocide against Muslims there. The Buddhists. India doesn't like radical Islam. Moderate Muslims don't like radical Islam. The world is trying to follow the Pope again for the same reason they did the first two times. You know, we talk about, all the world follows the beast, Revelation 13:3, right? Why? I got in trouble for asking those kind of questions. Now I know the answer. For the same reason they did the first two times, because the world was upset with Islam. Daniel 11:40-43. At the time of the end, oops, that's our time. Here's present truth, folks. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. He shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. He shall also enter the glorious land, that's Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. That's western Jordan. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries in the land of Egypt. I still believe it's Egypt. Shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold, silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians will follow at his, the king of the north's heels. Question. Western Jordan, Egypt, Libya, Ethiopia. Is that in the secular, Christian, or Muslim world? That's the Muslim world. When the king of the south goes down, he lists Muslim places. How much clearer can you get in the text? I have learned we need to get serious about what the text says. Ever heard of the Millerite movement? They didn't need to be disappointed. It said Jesus was going to come in the clouds to the Ancient of Days, not to the earth. But they overlooked that part of the verse because they wanted him to come to the earth. We need to stop wanting to see something and see what it says. It could really avoid some trouble. Go to what it actually says. When I did that, in a matter of a few seconds, one day, my whole world changed in Bible prophecy. And it was just, I'd been told one thing, and in a couple of moments, I realized I had been looking at the prophecy, and I know the history, and it matches. Why was I looking at something else? Thinking other ways. Let's learn to go to the text. That's our authority. That's our absolute authority. And so we have those who escape out of Islam, Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Egypt and many countries are overthrown, and Libya and Ethiopia follow after. All right, you can graph it out like this. The number one conflict, the black line is Islamic power, the red line is the papal power. The first one is Arab Islam. The Ottomans, second conflict. Crusades came right in the middle, between them. Then both the papacy and Islam are weak, and at the time of the end, they both come back. And they have. Daniel doesn't miss. And there's going to be a third conflict. The king of the south will push against the king of the north, and the king of the north will call for war. No, he already has. How many of you know when the Pope called for war against radical Islam? He did. I'll be showing you tomorrow. The day that it happened, the only Adventist I could get to listen to me that day was a guy by the name of Robert Falkenberg Sr. And from that day until his death, he helped us every way he could. Now, these shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Daniel 12:1, a couple verses later, and at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. The word for escape and the word for delivered are the same Hebrew word. That means they're tied together. That's your remnant out of Islam. Revelation. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life when they see the beast. The world either follows the beast or they're in the Lamb's book of life, right? Edom, Moab, and Ammon don't follow the king of the north. That leaves only one place for them at the end, in the Lamb's book of life. There's your remnant out of Islam. Acts 15. After this I will return and will rebuild the tabernacle of David, which has fallen down. I will rebuild its ruins, and I will set it up, so that the rest of mankind may seek the Lord, even all the Gentiles who are called by my name, says the Lord who does all these things. You believe God's going to have Gentiles in his kingdom, right? When Jesus restores the Davidic kingdom, but folks, the original prophecy that they're quoting from in Amos doesn't say Gentiles, it says Edom. And it's Edom, Moab, and Ammon that join with Jesus at the end in Daniel 11. It's matching other prophecies. Take a look at David's kingdom. Do you notice Edom, Moab, and Ammon are within the Davidic kingdom? And if Jesus restores the Davidic kingdom, it would include Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Now, I'll get into the geopolitical and the religious tomorrow a little better, but giving you a little idea where we're headed. Joel 2:28, and it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. And I'll tell you some of the stories tomorrow, but by the hundreds of thousands, Muslims are meeting Jesus and coming to the Bible. I mean by the hundreds of thousands. And most of them had dreams or visions to cause them to do so. But news from the east and the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. And he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him. The papacy goes down when it sets itself up in or near Jerusalem. Where's God going to set up his capital? The New Jerusalem? Right where old Jerusalem was? Why do you think everybody wants Jerusalem? Satan knows where God's throne is going to be. And remember, Satan said he was going to put his throne in God's place? That would mean in? That's why there's still a literal application to these prophecies, because Satan hasn't given up on it. He knows where God's going to set his up. That doesn't mean we have to go to Jerusalem for anything. You're going to get caught in the middle in the Bahamas. You don't have to go to Jerusalem to get this. All right? Take a look at something. He gets a message from the east and the north, the final message that really angers the king of the north and brings him down. Edom, Moab, and Ammon, God's remnant out of Islam, out of the north. God calls them out of Babylon, come out of her. Babylon's the king of the north, the original one in Daniel and Jeremiah. So out of the king of the north, God calls a remnant. Out of Islam, God calls a remnant. And together, they share the truth, and that gets the papacy mad. And they go out to destroy and annihilate God's people. And that's when Michael stands up and says, no, you don't. And he delivers his people. Daniel 12, 1 through 3. He delivers his people. There are resurrections, a good one and a bad one, like in Revelation. And then God's people live with him forever and ever. Aren't you glad Michael stands up and says, not on my watch? Yeah. And he takes down the king of the north and rescues his people. So here are the basics that you need to remember for tonight. You may not remember all the names of the historical figures we just blew by. That's okay. See that picture? That's got what you need to know. God's people get caught in the middle, both geopolitically and religiously. It's happening right now, but God wins. You don't want to follow the king of the south. You don't want to follow the king of the north. You want to take your stand in the... Because those are the only people that make it through the end. But you know, everybody's going to say the middle's a dangerous place. Because the king of the north or the king of the south could wipe you out there. True. But the middle is the only place to survive for eternity. And in our crazy world, Daniel 11 is here to tell us where to take the stand and give us the courage to take the stand and have a message that is fresh and present truth for the people around us. Oh, I should tell you, you can look up present truth. And you will find Ellen White says that 2,300 days is present truth. I've had people attack me for that because I said it's still true, but it's not present truth. You should check the date that she said it. It was in the late 1840s. Learn to be careful about context, both with Ellen White and the Bible.